Hello, this is Cloud Jockey from the labs. Thanks for joining it. This session is about Nested HyperV on vSphere. So first off, we're going to deploy a new virtual machine that we will later on use as a template. Of course, it's going to be a Windows 2012 server. So we'll choose our data center and basically pick the destination where we want to put that VM into. Takes a couple of steps to actually define where to deploy it. We deploy it on an NFS data store. Since this is my only shared resource, we make it into compatibility mode with vSphere 5.1. That's an important one. We'll choose to go for Windows Server 8, which is the 64-bit deployment, and also is the same for Windows 2012 server, its official name now. Then we're pointing to the Microsoft Windows 2000 server ISO file, since we want to install that system from the DVD. And we say, please bind the CD-ROM at startup time. Alright, then it's actually time to run the VM. Switch to the console, accept the security certificate, and connect to the VM. Since it didn't boot, we need to press Ctrl-Alt-Delete, the button on the top right corner, and then we can press any key to boot from the CD or DVD-ROM. And then it's actually loading the files and presenting us with the screen, hopefully, to actually move forward with the installation. Right, we choose the language and keyboard that we want to use and hit install now. And the setup is starting, and it's basically taking you a few minutes to actually copy the files and set up Windows 2012 server. We choose to go for the data center evaluation version. We accept the license terms, and I choose to go for the customized install to have a fresh install of the Windows 2012 server. So it's actually put on a thin provision device, and since by default all devices on an NFS data store are thin devices unless you have a VA integration and choose to go otherwise. But for our case, thin provision devices is working great. Alright, then we have to set the password for the administrator. Be aware that you meet the complexity requirements of that password, as otherwise you will be presented with the error message that you can see here. So make sure you meet those requirements. It's at least a special character as well as an alphanumeric value in that password. Then we're ready to log in for the first time, and we are then presented with the server manager. And the next thing that we actually want to do is install the VMware tools. For that, we need to go to the settings of the VM and actually get rid of that ISO DVD from the Windows 2012 server we just installed by hitting client device. And then we can say it's written in yellow to install the VMware tools. Alright, back in Windows Explorer, we will be presented with the VM tool CD loaded into the DVD slot. And we can move forward with the installation of VMware tools. Clicking next will give us the menu, and we'll select the typical installation, as that installation will copy us the right drivers and needed file. After a couple of minutes, this will be done. And we can hit finish. And now we of course need to reboot the system. After that, we can log back into the system once again. And then once again we shut down the system. Create a template out of that VM. Additionally, if you want to, you can enable remote services in order to be able to get back to your system by using the terminal services, so the remote desktop. And let's convert that virtual machine into a template. And this template then can be used for our Hyper-V deployments. So in order to do that, we choose to clone and deploy from template and clone that virtual machine, call it Hyper-V-V01. Select our cluster, select the data store, which is again the NFS data store because we need shared connectivity. And then make some customizations on the operating system and let the virtual machine run after it is deployed. So what we're now doing is we do the customization of the virtual machine. Basically my name and its organization, as you know it from Windows deployments. We'll give it a name in order that it can just append numbers to those names. And then we go for an administrative password. Please make sure it meets all the complexity requirements. And select the correct time zone. Then you can put in customized scripts, but we do not want to necessarily do that. But what we want to do is we want to give it some IP address credentials in a sense that we put in the subnet and the gateway. We point it to our DNS server that's used within the lab. Most likely this will be your Active Directory server, at least for the smaller deployments. And then we can also say to which domain it should join after the VM is deployed for the first time. So we put in our Windows domain name, the administrator, global domain administrator password. And if this is important, check the SID to create a new SID, otherwise we will have SID collisions. So now we can move on, choose the template and point it to an IP address. And then we are deploying a new VM out of the template. This will take roughly 20 minutes according to my experience, so this is fast forwarded, and then we are presented with the freshly deployed Hyper-V Windows 2012 server, but it's not in its role as a Hyper-V server. We have to come up with that first. It will start up again with the server manager. Shut it down once again. After our freshly deployed Windows 2012 server, we need to do some fixes here. So we go through VM settings and we'll have a look at the CPU. And what we want to do here is we want to say that we want to have a nested Hyper-V server. So we need to checkbox that point and we need to go to the advanced settings and put in to actually put some settings into the advanced configuration parameters. We want to have a new entry in there, which is called the hypervisor.cpu id. v0 and point it to false. We say OK. And these are the two steps that we need to do in order to convert our Windows 2012 server into a Hyper-V server. This will be a Hyper-V version 3.0 server. Right, let's log back into the the freshly deployed Windows 2012 server that we want to convert into a Hyper-V server. For that, we go into the server manager, go to add roles and select Hyper-V. But we do not need to include the management tools as we have a system center deployed we want to assign it to. So we don't need that one. Then we want to choose our Ethernet interface for assigning to a virtual switch. We will allow and prepare the server for live migrations, of course. And we want to have the server restart automatically after that's done if required. Take a few moments and then the new role is applied on the Windows 2012 server. Takes a couple of minutes and then it will be ready to run. Now we switch to our System Center server and actually assign our newly deployed Hyper-V server to that System Center. So we manually enter the credentials. This is cloudjockey/administrator and the administrative password in order to actually discover that Hyper-V server. And here we go. We'll check it and hit next. And we will reassociate this host of this environment in order to assign it to System Center. We want to turn on live migrations. Now see an error condition occurring. So obviously we missed something. So we go for Active Directory and see whether there is actually an account for System Center. And we need to deploy that one, and it was done on purpose that I left it out in order that you can actually troubleshoot when you first try to assign your Hyper-V server to System Center. So we created that user. I gave it the full rights that it will need. So I assigned it to the group of the domain administrator. Of course, it's not wise to do that in a productive environment, but for a test lab environment, that works. And it's perfectly okay. So, next try. Put in all the credentials, the computer name to have it discovered. Checkbox, hit next, reassociate the host with this VMM environment, turn on live migrations, and let us discover. Right, we'll see what happens. We'll get presented with another error. Now, that was done on purpose once again, so in order to help you troubleshoot. So we go into the Windows firewall settings of that Hyper-V server, and we need to adjust the settings here because obviously there was a firewall prevented us from installing and pushing the agent that's needed for the Hyper-V server in order to have it assigned and managed by VMM. And we go back to our System Center server and once again restart the discovery, and we have to provide it once again with the credential, and be aware also that you put in the right username. So the newly created one I just called SC. Let me see what happens to the discovery. It looks better now as the virtual machine host is being added and the software is being installed. Alright, it left us with some warning, but as you can see, it's here and it can be managed by VM. Thank you very much for joining today, and goodbye.